I built my father's empire from nothing, working Saturdays and Sundays while my sister Carla spent $5,000 a month on his credit card. But when she got pregnant at 38, he simply called me saying, "I transferred the company to Carla. You understand, right? She needs stability for the baby." The call came at 7 in the morning, his voice matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather. I stood in my kitchen, coffee cup frozen halfway to my lips, watching steam rise and dissipate while my entire world collapsed into those few words. I went to the office that same afternoon to collect my belongings. The receptionist wouldn't meet my eyes as I walked past. Carla was already there, perched on what had been my desk chair, surrounded by interior designers with fabric swatches and paint samples. She glanced up when I entered, her hand resting protectively on her barely visible bump, a diamond bracelet I'd never seen before catching the fluorescent light. "Oh, Diana! Perfect timing," she said, her voice dripping with false warmth. "I'm completely overwhelmed here. Could you give me a quick training? I have a meeting with the Riverside investors in 2 hours, and I need to look like I know what I'm talking about." She laughed, a tinkling sound that made my jaw clench. Behind her, the designers were already removing the photographs of my business achievements from the walls, replacing them with generic abstract art. I should have walked out. I should have let her drown in her own incompetence. Instead, some deeply ingrained sense of duty made me sit down and explain everything. Cash flow projections, the Riverside Group's specific concerns about quarterly returns, the talking points I'd spent 3 weeks preparing. She nodded along, typing notes into her phone with manicured nails, occasionally interrupting to ask the designers if they preferred sage green or dove gray for the accent wall. 2 hours later, I watched from the glass-walled conference room as Carla walked into that meeting wearing a designer maternity dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She had my notes, my research, my years of relationship building with those investors. What she didn't have was any actual understanding of how the business worked. The meeting lasted 17 minutes. I timed it. When the Riverside representatives walked out, their faces were carefully neutral in that way that screamed disaster. Carla emerged 5 minutes later, her confidence visibly shaken, scrolling frantically through her phone. She didn't look at me as she passed, heading straight for Dad's office and closing the door. What nobody knew yet was that I hadn't just been working those Saturdays and Sundays building the company. I'd also been documenting everything, every inflated expense report Carla filed, every business lunch that was actually shopping trips, every instance of Dad using company funds to subsidize her lifestyle, and most importantly, every contract, every client relationship, every proprietary process that I'd developed and that existed solely in my detailed records and in relationships I'd carefully cultivated. Because I'd learned something Carla never had. Real power isn't given, it's built. And I'd spent 12 years building something she couldn't simply inherit with a phone call and a pregnancy announcement. The investors walking out of that conference room wasn't a disaster. It was the opening move. The Riverside deal collapsed officially 3 days later. Dad called me at midnight, his voice tight with controlled panic, asking if I could fix this situation. I let the phone ring 4 times before answering, taking my time to set down the wine glass I'd been holding, savoring each second of his discomfort. "Diana, the Riverside Group pulled out completely. They said Carla couldn't answer basic questions about our operational capacity. $800,000 just walked away." He paused, waiting for me to jump in with solutions like I always had. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. "Can you call them? Explain that there was a misunderstanding?" "I don't work there anymore, Dad. Remember?" I kept my voice pleasant, almost friendly. "Carla's in charge now. I'm sure she'll figure it out." She seemed very confident when I left. "Don't be difficult. This is serious. The company needed me for 12 years. Now it needs Carla. I'm sure her interior designer can help." I hung up before he could respond, blocking his number immediately afterward. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from exhilaration. Within a week, 3 more clients requested meetings to discuss the transition. I knew what that meant. They were preparing to leave. I'd built personal relationships with each of them, had their private cell numbers, knew their concerns and priorities. Carla had a contact list and Dad's last name. It wasn't going to be enough. My former assistant Marcus called me 2 weeks after I'd left, his voice low and urgent. "Diana, you need to know what's happening here." Carla fired the entire accounting department because she didn't like how they questioned her decisions. She hired her friends instead, people who've never worked in corporate finance. "The quarterly reports are a disaster." "That sounds like a management choice," I replied carefully. Marcus and I had worked together for 6 years. He understood what I wasn't saying. Right. Well, several of us are updating our resumes. Just thought you should know. He paused. Also, she's been using the company card for personal expenses. Not small stuff either. She spent $42,000 last month on nursery furniture. Charged it all to the business account. I thanked him and hung up, adding that information to the growing file I'd been building. Every phone call, every piece of information from remaining contacts inside the company, every financial record I'd kept copies of. I wasn't just documenting Carla's incompetence, I was building a legal case. The breaking point came during the 3rd month. Dad called from an unknown number, bypassing my block. His voice had lost all its commanding authority, replaced by something that sounded disturbingly close to desperation. Diana, we need to talk. In person. Please. We met at a coffee shop near my new apartment, far from the office and the life I'd built there. Dad looked like he'd aged 5 years and 3 months. His suit was slightly rumpled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. The company is hemorrhaging money. Clients are leaving, and the ones who stay are demanding significant discounts because they don't trust Carla's leadership. We've lost 7 major accounts in 2 months. He wrapped his hands around his coffee cup, like it could provide some kind of stability. I need you to come back. Not as an employee, as a partner. Equal stake in the business. What does Carla think about this offer? I asked, already knowing the answer. His jaw tightened. She doesn't know I'm here, but she'll understand. She has to. The business is dying, Diana. Everything we built, everything you built, it's falling apart. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting him sit in the uncomfortable silence. You transferred the company to her. That was your choice. These are the consequences. I made a mistake. The words seemed to physically pain him. I thought she needed security for the baby, and I thought you'd always be there to help her. I didn't realize she couldn't actually run the business. You didn't realize, or you didn't care? I asked quietly, because I spent 12 years proving I could run that company, working weekends, sacrificing relationships, building every system and process that made it profitable. And you gave it all to someone who saw it as a piggy bank. He leaned forward, desperation making him aggressive. So this is revenge? You're going to let everything collapse out of spite? I'm not letting anything collapse. Carla is doing that perfectly well on her own. I stood, gathering my purse. You made your choice, Dad. You chose to believe that blood was thicker than competence. Now you get to live with that choice. The company will be sold, he said, his voice breaking slightly. I'm meeting with buyers next week. We'll be lucky to get half what it's worth. All those years, all that work, it'll be gone. Not all of it, I replied, and something in my tone made him look up sharply. The clients aren't leaving because they don't like change. They're leaving because they don't trust the leadership, but they still trust me. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed quickly by calculation. What do you want? I'll tell you what I don't want. I don't want to save Carla's company. I don't want to be her safety net or her consultant or her partner. What I'm going to do is watch her fail completely, watch you sell everything at a loss, and then I'm going to rebuild. Without either of you. I paused at the table looking down at him. And Dad, every single one of those clients you're losing, I've already had coffee with them. They're just waiting for me to tell them where to go. I walked out of that coffee shop with my head high, leaving him sitting alone with the wreckage of his choices. Behind me, I heard his coffee cup hit the table hard, the sound of a man realizing he'd made a catastrophic error in judgment. It was, I had to admit, one of the most satisfying sounds I'd ever heard. The next morning, I registered Mitchell Consulting, LLC. The name was deliberate. Not Mitchell Enterprises, not Diana's Business Solutions, but something that sounded established, professional, capable. I signed the lease on a small office space in the building next to where Dad's company had been headquartered. Close enough that people would notice. Far enough that I wouldn't have to see Carla's designer paint choices every day. My phone started ringing before I'd even finished setting up my desk. Marcus called first, asking if the rumors were true. Then Jennifer from accounting, whom Carla had fired for being negative. Then David from sales, who'd watched Carla blow the Riverside deal and spent the last 3 months watching the company crumble. Within 2 weeks, I'd hired 8 former employees, all of them people I'd personally trained, all of them intimately familiar with how I ran operations. The clients followed even faster than I'd anticipated. Riverside called on day 3. They'd heard through industry connections that I'd left Mitchell Enterprises and started my own firm. Were we taking on new clients? Could we handle their portfolio? I scheduled the meeting for the following week, giving myself time to set up the infrastructure properly. When I walked into that conference room, I brought detailed proposals, financial projections, and a team that could answer every single question they asked. We signed the $800,000 contract that Carla had lost. It felt like vindication in contract form. Dad called again, this time from his actual number. I answered on the first ring, knowing the sound of my voice picking up would tell him I deliberately blocked him before. "You're stealing my clients," he said without preamble. "Your clients," I corrected, "are making independent business decisions based on who they trust to deliver results. That's not theft. That's capitalism. You're destroying your sister's future. The baby will be fine," I cut him off. "Carla has a trust fund from Mom's estate that she's never touched because she's been too busy spending your money. She'll survive. She just won't have a company she didn't earn and doesn't deserve." The sound of him breathing heavily filled the silence. Then, "What if I made you CEO? Full control, Carla stays as a figurehead, but you run everything?" It was tempting for exactly 3 seconds. Then I thought about 12 years of Saturdays and Sundays, of building something only to have it handed to someone else, of being expected to fix problems I wasn't trusted to prevent. "No. Sell the company, Dad. Cut your losses. Maybe Carla can use the money to hire a competent financial advisor." I hung up again, and this time I didn't block the number. I wanted him to be able to reach me, to know I was choosing not to save him. Marcus knocked on my office door that afternoon, his expression grim. "You need to see this." He handed me his phone, showing me Carla's Instagram post. It was a photo of her in the office, her bump now visible under a designer dress, with a caption about building legacy for the next generation and stepping into leadership. The comments section was vicious. Former employees, industry contacts, even some clients had left remarks ranging from pointed questions about recent account losses to outright accusations of incompetence. Someone had shared a screenshot of the Riverside deal memo with key details redacted, just enough to show that she'd been asked basic questions she couldn't answer. "Who leaked that?" I asked, though I had my suspicions. Marcus's smile was thin. "Let's just say people who watched you build that company for 12 years aren't thrilled about watching her destroy it in 12 weeks. By month 4, the situation had deteriorated beyond what even I had anticipated. Dad's company lost 11 major clients, 8 of whom signed with my firm. The remaining accounts were either too small to matter or locked into contracts they couldn't break without penalty. Carla had burned through nearly $300,000 in company funds on personal expenses, from nursery furniture to a luxury car she claimed was necessary for client meetings. The buyer's dad had been negotiating with lowered their offer twice. The company that had been valued at just under $3 million when he'd transferred it to Carla was now being sold for $1.4 million, barely enough to cover outstanding debts and severance packages for the employees Carla hadn't already fired. I heard about the final sale through Marcus, who heard it from his former colleague in legal. Dad had signed the papers that morning. Carla had been absent from the signing, claiming pregnancy complications, though her Instagram showed her at a luxury spa resort the same day. That evening, I poured myself an expensive whiskey and sat in my new office, looking at the client board that showed 19 active contracts, 8 more in negotiation, and a revenue projection that exceeded Dad's company's best year. I'd done it, not by destroying them directly, but by letting them destroy themselves while I built something better. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Carla. "We need to talk. This has gone too far." I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Some bridges deserve to burn. The confrontation came 3 days later, not through phone calls or texts, but through Dad showing up at my office unannounced. My receptionist, Sarah, buzzed me with a warning in her voice. "Diana, your father is here. He says it's urgent." I could have refused to see him, should have, probably. But curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see his face now that the company was gone, now that the consequences of his choices were irreversible. He walked into my office looking diminished. Not just tired or stressed, but actually smaller somehow, as if the weight of his failures had compressed him physically. He didn't wait for me to invite him to sit. "Carla's in the hospital," he said without preamble. "Preeclampsia. High blood pressure, protein in her urine. They're talking about inducing labor early." I felt a twist in my stomach. Whatever my sister had done, whatever resentment I carried, I'd never wished harm on her unborn child. "I'm sorry to hear that. I hope she and the baby will be okay. She's asking for you." He said it like it was a weapon, like my concern for her health would override everything else. "I'm sure she has plenty of support. You're there. Her friends disappeared when the money did." His voice was bitter. Once she couldn't afford to pick up the check at expensive restaurants or fund their shopping trips, suddenly they were all too busy. The only person who calls her now is the credit card company asking about payment. I waited, knowing there was more coming. The hospital bills are already mounting. Specialized care for high-risk pregnancy, potential NICU costs if the baby comes early. Her trust fund is tied up in long-term investments with penalties for early withdrawal. The money from selling the company is mostly gone, used to pay off the debts she accumulated, and you want me to help financially, I finished for him. He had the grace to look ashamed. I'm asking you to remember that she's your sister. That despite everything, family should matter. The laugh that escaped me was sharp and humorless. Family should matter. That's interesting coming from you. Did family matter when you gave her everything I'd built? Did it matter when you expected me to train her to take over my job? Did it matter when you called me at midnight to fix her disasters but never once asked if I was okay after losing everything? I made a mistake, he said, and his voice cracked. I know that now. I thought I was doing what was best for both of you. Carla needed security, and I thought you were strong enough to land on your feet. I was strong enough. I am strong enough. I built this. I gestured around my office, but that doesn't mean I should use what I've built to rescue someone who never once appreciated what I sacrificed for the family business. She's your sister, he repeated, as if blood relation trumped everything else. She stopped being my sister when she watched me lose everything and asked me to train her how to do my job. I stood, signaling the meeting was over. I'll send flowers to the hospital. I hope she and the baby are okay. But I'm not paying her bills. I'm not rescuing her financially, and I'm not pretending that DNA creates obligations that respect doesn't. Dad stood slowly, looking older than his 63 years. When did you become so cold? I learned it from you, I replied. You taught me that business is business, that sentimentality doesn't pay bills, that tough decisions have to be made. You just never expected me to apply those lessons to my own family. He walked to the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. You've won, Diana. You've proven your point. The company's gone. Carla's broke. I'm watching everything I built disappear. Is this really what you wanted? What I wanted, I said quietly, was for you to value my 12 years of work as much as you valued her 9-week pregnancy announcement. What I wanted was to be seen as competent, not just reliable. What I wanted was for you to choose me for once, not because I was useful, but because I'd earned it. And now I don't need you to choose me. I chose myself. I sat back down at my desk, opening my laptop in clear dismissal. Close the door on your way out. He stood there for another moment, searching for words that wouldn't come, then left. Through my office window, I watched him walk to his car, shoulders slumped, moving like a man carrying impossible weight. I felt a momentary pang of something that might have been sympathy, or might have been sadness for what our family had been before greed and favoritism had poisoned it. Then my phone rang with a new client inquiry, and I pushed the feeling aside. There was work to do, a company to build, a future to create that didn't depend on anyone's approval, but my own. Carla's baby arrived 6 weeks early, a tiny girl named Emma who spent 3 weeks in the NICU before being cleared to go home. I learned this not from Dad or Carla, but from a brief announcement on social media, carefully curated photos of a premature infant in an incubator with monitors attached. The comments section was sparse compared to her earlier posts. The fair-weather friends had indeed vanished. I sent flowers to the hospital as promised. An expensive arrangement with a simple card. Congratulations on your daughter. No warmth, no invitation for reconciliation. Just acknowledgement of the birth. Carla sent back a text I hadn't expected. Thank you. I know I don't deserve your kindness. I didn't respond. Acknowledgement wasn't kindness, and her newfound humility didn't erase the past 3 months. Mitchell Consulting hit the $1 million revenue mark in month 6. We'd grown from 8 employees to 23, occupying the entire second floor of our building. The clients kept coming, drawn by reputation and results. I'd learned something important. Success didn't require family legacy or inherited wealth. It required competence, dedication, and the willingness to work when others wouldn't. Marcus walked into my office one Tuesday morning with news that made me set down my coffee. You're not going to believe this. Carla applied for a job here. Posted her resume through our website portal. I pulled up the application on my computer. There it was. Carla Mitchell, with a resume that listed CEO of Mitchell Enterprises for 3 months, followed by an employment gap she'd labeled family medical leave. Her cover letter talked about learning from past mistakes and bringing fresh perspective to operational challenges. The audacity was almost impressive. What do you want me to do with it? Marcus asked carefully. I could have deleted it with a single click. Let her application disappear into the digital void with no response. That would have been the clean, professional choice. Instead, I did something else entirely. Schedule her for an interview, I said. Friday at 2, standard protocol, panel interview with 3 department heads. Marcus's eyes widened. Are you serious? Completely. If she wants to work here, she can go through the same process as everyone else. No special treatment, no family considerations, just her qualifications against the role requirements. The interview was scheduled. I didn't tell Carla I knew about it, didn't warn Dad it was happening. I simply let the process unfold naturally, with one exception. I made sure I was part of the interview panel, sitting across from her with 2 of my senior consultants flanking me. Carla walked into that conference room looking nothing like the confident, designer-dressed woman who'd taken over my office 6 months ago. She wore a simple black suit that was professional but unremarkable, carried a portfolio that looked hastily assembled, and had dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. The baby weight hadn't fully come off yet, and she moved with the exhausted deliberateness of a new mother surviving on broken sleep. Thank you for seeing me, she said, her voice smaller than I remembered. This is a professional interview for an entry-level consulting position, I replied, my tone neutral. Let's start with your experience at Mitchell Enterprises. Can you walk us through your 3 months as CEO? She swallowed hard. The other panelists had her resume in front of them, waiting for her response. There was no escape, no way to spin the story without acknowledging the disaster. I failed, she said finally. I was given control of a company I didn't understand and wasn't prepared to run. I lost major clients, mismanaged finances, and ultimately drove the business to a forced sale at significant loss. Her hands twisted together in her lap. I thought being family meant I deserved the position, but deserving something and being qualified for it are completely different things. It was the most honest thing I'd ever heard her say. Why should we hire you? Asked Jennifer, my head of accounting, whom Carla had fired 6 months earlier. Carla's eyes met Jennifer's, and I saw the moment recognition hit, followed by visible shame. You shouldn't, she said quietly, not based on my resume or my track record. I destroyed a company and alienated people who were trying to help me. If you're asking why I applied, it's because I need a job, and because I finally understand what my sister built. I watched her company for 6 months from the outside, saw how she created something successful from nothing, and realized she did it through actual competence, not just by inheriting it. You understand that if you were hired, you'd be reporting to people you once fired or looked down on? Marcus asked, his voice carefully neutral. I understand. I deserve that. Carla looked at me directly for the first time. I deserve worse than that, honestly. The interview continued for another 30 minutes, covering her skills, her understanding of the industry, her ability to handle the demanding schedule and pressure. She answered honestly, admitting gaps in knowledge, acknowledging where she'd need training. It was clear she'd at least spent some time trying to understand the business she'd destroyed. When it was over, she stood to leave, then paused at the door. Diana, can I say something off the record? I nodded. I'm sorry. I know those words don't fix anything or change what happened. I know I cost you years of your life and work, and I know Dad's decision to give me the company was wrong. I know I should have fought for you instead of accepting something I hadn't earned. Tears welled in her eyes but didn't fall. I'm not asking for forgiveness or even understanding. I just need you to know that I finally see what I did, and I'm sorry. After she left, the 3 of us sat in silence for a moment. Jennifer spoke first. That was honest. It was, I agreed. So are we hiring her? Marcus asked. I thought about it for a long moment. Thought about revenge and justice, about the difference between the two. Thought about 12 years of work handed away. About watching her destroy everything I'd built. About the cold moment when she'd asked me to train her to take over my position. No, I said finally. Her apology was genuine, and I appreciate that. But appreciation doesn't create obligation. She's not qualified for the position, and I don't owe her a chance to rebuild at my expense. Send the standard rejection email. Marcus and Jennifer nodded, gathering their materials. After they left, I sat alone in the conference room, staring at the space where Carla had sat, finally seeing the truth of what she'd done. It should have felt triumphant, watching her humbled, seeing her understand too late what she'd thrown away. Instead, it just felt finished. She'd had her chance, made her choices, and now lived with the consequences. That wasn't my responsibility to fix. The rejection email went out that evening. Professional, brief, wishing her luck in her job search. She didn't respond, and I didn't expect her to. Some endings didn't require closure, just acceptance that the story was over. 1 year after Dad transferred the company to Carla, Mitchell Consulting celebrated our first anniversary with a client appreciation event in the same hotel where Dad used to host his annual company parties. The symmetry wasn't lost on anyone who'd worked at the original Mitchell Enterprises. 42 clients attended, including Riverside, whose contract had now grown to $1.2 million annually. I stood in that ballroom, surrounded by people I'd hired and trained, celebrating a company I'd built entirely on my own merit, and felt something settle in my chest that might have been peace. Dad attended, surprisingly. He came alone, stood in the back of the room during my speech, and left without trying to speak to me. I saw him watching, though, saw the expression on his face that combined pride with regret. It was enough. Carla didn't attend. According to mutual acquaintances, she'd found work as an administrative assistant at a small accounting firm, earning a fraction of what she'd spent monthly when she had access to Dad's company accounts. She was surviving, learning to budget, figuring out how to support her daughter on her own. The trust fund from Mom's estate was being held for Emma's college education, untouchable, ensuring at least one generation would benefit from our mother's financial wisdom. Marcus knocked on my office door 2 weeks after the anniversary event. "Thought you'd want to see this." He handed me his phone, showing me a news article. The company that had bought Dad's failing business had just been acquired by a larger firm for $4.8 million. The new owners had restructured everything, brought in competent leadership, and turned it profitable again. "They made money on something Carla destroyed," Marcus noted. "They made money by fixing what Carla destroyed," I corrected. "There's a difference." My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. "I saw the article. You were right. About everything." I stared at the message for a long moment before responding. "I know. 3 words. No elaboration. No invitation to rebuild our relationship. No forgiveness or resentment. Just acknowledgement of a truth he'd learned too late to matter." The business continued growing. We expanded to a second location, hired 53 employees by year 2, and landed contracts that exceeded anything Dad's company had achieved. The name Mitchell became associated with my success rather than his legacy, and that felt like the final victory. People sometimes asked if I regretted not helping Carla, not reconciling with Dad, not giving them second chances. The answer was simple: no. I'd learned that you don't rebuild bridges that were burned deliberately. You don't rescue people who pushed you into the fire. You don't sacrifice your success to validate someone else's redemption arc. Carla had her chance. Dad had his. They made their choices, and I made mine. The difference was that my choices were based on competence, work ethic, and the understanding that success isn't inherited. It's earned. 5 years later, Mitchell Consulting was valued at $8.3 million. I'd built something from nothing, not because I had family support or inherited advantage, but because I understood what they never did. Real power comes from being excellent at what you do and having the courage to walk away from anyone who doesn't recognize that excellence. Dad died 3 years after the company sale. Heart attack, sudden and unexpected. At his funeral, Carla approached me with her daughter, now a precocious 4-year-old with curly hair in his eyes. "She should know her aunt," Carla said quietly. "If you're willing." I looked at the little girl, innocent of her mother's mistakes, and felt something soften slightly. "Maybe," I said. "Someday, when she's old enough to understand that family is built on respect, not just shared DNA." Carla nodded, understanding the conditional nature of my response. She didn't push, didn't plead, just thanked me and moved on. It was the most dignity she'd shown in years. Emma Mitchell, my niece, grew up knowing her Aunt Diana as the successful businesswoman who occasionally sent thoughtful birthday gifts and Christmas cards, but maintained careful distance. Maybe one day, when she was older, I'd tell her the full story. Maybe I'd explain that her mother had been given everything and squandered it, while I'd been given nothing and built an empire. Or maybe I'd just let her see the evidence. Mitchell Consulting's continued success, the industry awards, the satisfied clients, the employees who'd followed me because they believed in competent leadership over family legacy. That seemed like lesson enough. I never did forgive Dad or Carla. Forgiveness would have required them to fully understand what they'd taken from me, and I wasn't convinced either of them ever truly grasped it. What they understood was loss. Dad lost his company. Carla lost her easy life. Both lost their relationship with me. But understanding loss isn't the same as understanding what you stole. It's just knowing that consequences exist, and that I decided was their real education, not the business lessons I could have taught Carla, not the management skills Dad should have valued in me, but the fundamental truth that actions have consequences. that competence matters more than bloodlines, and that some bridges, once burned, aren't worth rebuilding. Mitchell Consulting thrived without them. I thrived without them. And that was the revenge that mattered most. Not their suffering, but my success. Not their downfall, but my rise. Not what they lost, but what I built. 12 years of Saturdays and Sundays finally paid off. Just not for the people who thought they could take credit for my work. Update. 3 years after Dad's funeral, Mitchell Consulting had grown beyond anything I'd imagined during those early desperate months of building from nothing. We'd expanded to 4 cities, employed 137 people, and our annual revenue had crossed $15 million. The industry magazines that once featured Dad's company now ran profiles about my meteoric rise and innovative approach to client relations. What they didn't know was that every success felt like placing another brick in a wall between my past and present. Each contract signed another step away from the family that had undervalued me. The call came on a Tuesday morning in March. Unknown number, but I'd stopped screening calls years ago. Confidence meant answering everything. Diana Mitchell speaking. Ms. Mitchell, this is Patricia Hernandez from Riverside County Hospital. I'm calling about Carla Mitchell. You're listed as her emergency contact. My hand tightened on the phone. What happened? She was in a car accident this morning. Significant injuries, currently in surgery. Her daughter Emma is here with us, unharmed physically but very frightened. Can you come to the hospital? I should have felt something dramatic. Rage, vindication, even satisfaction that karma had finally caught up with her completely. Instead, I felt only a dull, tired sense of inevitability. Of course this would happen. Of course I would be the emergency contact despite 5 years of calculated distance. I'll be there in 40 minutes, I said, already gathering my keys. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and anxiety. Emma sat in the pediatric waiting area with a social worker, her 8-year-old face pale and tracked with tear stains. She looked up when I entered, and I saw Dad's eyes and Carla's bone structure and something else, a wariness that children shouldn't have to carry. Aunt Diana, her voice was small, uncertain. I knelt in front of her. Hi, Emma, I'm here. Your mom is going to be okay. The doctors are taking good care of her. The other driver ran a red light, she whispered. Mom tried to stop but couldn't. Is she going to die like Grandpa did? The social worker gave me a meaningful look. They'd clearly been having this conversation for a while. Your mom is strong, I said, choosing truth over empty comfort. She's in surgery now, and that's where she needs to be. But you're safe, and I'm going to stay with you until we know more. What followed were 6 hours of waiting, of keeping Emma distracted with hospital cafeteria hot chocolate and card games on my phone, of speaking with doctors who used words like internal bleeding and multiple fractures, and next 72 hours are critical. Carla had been T-boned on the driver's side by a pickup truck going 50 in a 35 zone. The other driver had been texting. Emma fell asleep against my shoulder around hour 4, exhausted from fear and uncertainty. Holding her felt strange. This child I'd deliberately kept at arm's length, this niece I'd sent gifts to but never really known. She felt small and vulnerable and completely dependent on adults who kept making terrible choices. The surgeon finally emerged at 8 p.m., still in scrubs, looking exhausted. She made it through surgery. We've stabilized the internal bleeding and set the fractures. She's going to have a long recovery. We're looking at minimum 3 months before she can return to any kind of normal activity, possibly longer. Can I see her? She's in ICU, unconscious, family only, but given that you're the emergency contact and caring for her daughter, I'll allow a brief visit. Carla looked impossibly fragile in the ICU bed, connected to machines that beeped rhythmically, her face swollen and discolored from impact. One arm was in a cast, and I could see bandages beneath the hospital gown, suggesting extensive injuries I couldn't see. This was my sister. The woman who'd taken everything I built and destroyed it. The person who'd asked me to train her to do my job. The mother who now lay broken because someone else had been careless with their power and attention. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired. A nurse approached quietly. Are you able to care for the daughter? Otherwise, we'll need to contact Child Services for temporary placement. The words hit me like physical impact. Child Services? Foster care. Emma waking up not only without her mother but among strangers, in a system already overwhelmed and underfunded. I'll take her, I heard myself say. How long will Carla be hospitalized? Minimum 2 weeks, possibly 4 depending on complications. Then she'll need extensive home care and physical therapy. I did the math automatically. 4 weeks of Emma staying with me, then months of Carla recovering. Unable to work, probably unable to afford the medical bills even with insurance. The administrative assistant salary she'd been earning wouldn't cover missed work and mounting healthcare costs. This was the moment, the perfect revenge I'd never orchestrated. Carla completely dependent, broken, facing financial ruin from circumstances beyond her control. I could walk away, let the system handle it, maintain my boundaries, and let natural consequences play out. Emma shifted against me in sleep, making a small, worried sound. I made a decision that would have horrified the Diana from 5 years ago. The next morning, I called Marcus from the hospital. I need you to clear my schedule for the next 2 weeks. Family emergency. Redirect urgent matters to Jennifer. Everything else can wait. Is everything okay? My sister was in a serious car accident. I'm taking temporary custody of my niece. The pause on the other end spoke volumes. Marcus knew the history. Do you need anything? Just cover the office. I'll work remotely as much as possible. Emma woke up groggy and disoriented. I explained as simply as I could. Her mother was hurt but healing. She would stay with me for a while. We would visit the hospital every day. Why are you helping? She asked with 8-year-old directness. Mom said you don't talk to her anymore because she hurt you really bad. The honesty was startling. Your mom did hurt me. Very badly. But that's between me and her, not between me and you. And right now, you need someone to take care of you while your mom heals. Are you still mad at her? I considered the question carefully. I was. For a long time. Maybe I still am about some things. But being mad doesn't mean I want bad things to happen to her, and it definitely doesn't mean I'd let you be alone and scared. We went to my condo, not the original apartment from 5 years ago, but a spacious 3-bedroom I'd purchased 2 years prior. Emma got the guest room, and we spent the afternoon acquiring necessities. Clothes in her size, toiletries, her favorite cereal from a list she provided in a small, careful voice. That evening, my phone rang. Tyler, my partner of 3 years, calling from his business trip in Seattle. Marcus told me what happened. Do you need me to come back early? No, finish your meetings, I'm managing. Diana, you don't have to do this alone. I can be there tomorrow. I know, but I need to figure this out myself first. The first week was an adjustment. Emma was well behaved, almost eerily so, as if afraid that any trouble would result in being sent away. She did her homework without prompting, helped clear dishes, thanked me excessively for everything. The politeness felt like armor. On day 4, she asked if we could visit her mother. Carla had been moved out of ICU, was conscious but heavily medicated. When Emma walked into that hospital room and saw her mother's battered face, she burst into tears. The first real emotion I'd seen from her. Baby, I'm okay, Carla whispered through split lips. Aunt Diana is taking good care of you? Emma nodded, unable to speak. Carla's eyes met mine over Emma's head. In them, I saw something I'd never seen before. Not just regret or shame, but genuine, desperate gratitude and fear. Fear that I would abandon them both to struggle alone. Thank you, she mouthed silently. I nodded but didn't respond. This wasn't forgiveness. This wasn't reconciliation. This was simply ensuring that an 8-year-old child didn't suffer for her mother's past mistakes or present misfortune. The second week brought complications. Carla's insurance covered only 70% of the medical bills. The remaining 30% amounted to $48,000, more than her entire annual salary. Her landlord called to inform her that rent was due, and missing payments would result in eviction. Her car had been totaled, the insurance settlement barely covering the remaining loan balance. She was, in every practical sense, financially destroyed. Again, this time through no fault of her own. Emma came to me on day 10 with her mother's phone, her face anxious. Mom's crying. She won't tell me why, but I heard her talking to the hospital about bills. I took the phone gently. Let me handle this, okay? Go do your reading homework. I called the hospital's billing department, explained the situation, negotiated a payment plan. Then I did something that would have been unthinkable 5 years ago. I paid the outstanding balance in full with the stipulation that Carla never know the source. As far as she would be told, the hospital had a charity program for single mothers in crisis. Marcus called that evening to check in. Jennifer says you're working miracles remotely, but we miss you. When are you coming back? Soon. Another week, probably. Emma's settling in, and Carla should be discharged by Friday. And then what? I don't know yet. The truth was more complicated. Watching Emma do homework at my dining table, hearing her laugh at silly TV shows, seeing her slowly relax into the safety of routine, it had awakened something I deliberately suppressed for years. The capacity to care about family, to feel responsibility that went beyond grudges and grievances. Carla was discharged on day 13 with strict instructions for home care, physical therapy, and absolutely no work for 3 months minimum. Her apartment lease was month to month. Her savings non-existent. Her support system reduced to me, the sister she'd betrayed 5 years ago. I made a decision. You'll both stay in my guest rooms, I told her when the hospital transport brought her to my condo instead of her apartment. 3 months until you're cleared to work. No arguments. Carla stared at me from her wheelchair, her face still bruised, her arm still casted. Diana, I can't accept. You don't have a choice. Emma needs stability, you need care, and I have the space and resources. This doesn't erase the past. It doesn't mean we're suddenly sisters again. It means I'm not going to let my niece suffer because you and I have unresolved issues. Why? Her voice broke. After everything I did, why would you help me? I looked at Emma, who was watching us both with anxious eyes, trying to understand adult complexities she shouldn't have to navigate. Because she needs me to, I said simply. And because watching you suffer doesn't make me feel powerful anymore. It just makes me tired. Tyler came home that weekend, found Emma teaching me how to braid hair in the living room, found Carla doing physical therapy exercises in the guest room, found me managing a household that looked nothing like the solitary, successful existence I'd built so carefully. So this is what you've been dealing with, he said, watching Emma demonstrate the proper way to section hair. This is what I'm choosing to deal with, I corrected. He studied my face carefully. You're different, softer somehow. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just finally healing from wounds I've been keeping open on purpose. The 3 months stretched into 4, then 5. Carla recovered slowly, returned to work part-time, began paying rent, a modest amount I'd insisted on more for her dignity than financial need. Emma transferred to a better school near my condo, joined the art club, started calling me Aunt D without the formal distance. Mitchell Consulting continued thriving. I continued building, but the empire felt less like a fortress now and more like a foundation. Something solid to stand on rather than walls to hide behind. One evening, 6 months after the accident, Carla knocked on my office door. I was working late, reviewing contracts, living the life I'd built from ashes. Can we talk? She asked quietly. I saved my work and closed the laptop, giving her my full attention. I need you to know something, she began, her voice steady despite obvious nervousness. I understand now. Not just intellectually, but really understand what you built and what I destroyed. These months watching you work, seeing how you run your company, taking care of Emma while managing everything, I finally see what I was too blind and entitled to see before. Okay, I said neutrally. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for a relationship. I just need you to know that I understand, and that everything you felt, the anger, the betrayal, the need to walk away, it was all completely justified. She wiped her eyes roughly. You didn't owe me this second chance. You especially didn't owe Emma anything. But you gave it anyway. And that says more about who you are than anything I destroyed says about who I was. I sat with her words for a long moment, feeling something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but something adjacent to it. Acknowledgement maybe. Release. I'm never going to forget what happened, I said finally. The company I built, the betrayal, the way you watched me lose everything and asked me to train you, that's always going to be part of our history. I know, but Emma shouldn't suffer for our past. And watching you actually try to understand, actually change, that matters. It doesn't erase anything, but it matters. Carla nodded, tears spilling over. Can I ask one thing? Maybe. Can Emma keep living here? With you? Even after I'm fully recovered? She rushed on before I could respond. Not because I don't want her, but because you've given her stability and opportunities I can't provide. The school, the safety, the example of what hard work and intelligence can build. I want her to have what I threw away, the chance to learn from someone who actually earned their success. The request stunned me. Not because it was unreasonable, but because it was the most selfless thing I'd ever heard Carla say. Let me think about it, I replied carefully. That's a big decision for everyone involved. She nodded and left, leaving me alone with thoughts that felt too large for one late-night office session. The story didn't end with neat reconciliation or complete healing. Some wounds are too deep for perfect closure. But it did end with Emma staying in my guest room that became her room, with Carla visiting every weekend, with slow rebuilding of something that wasn't quite the sisterhood we'd had as children, but was honest in ways the past never had been. Mitchell Consulting hit $20 million in annual revenue the year Emma turned 10. At the company celebration, she stood beside me, proud of her aunt, who'd built an empire from nothing, who'd chosen strength over bitterness, who'd shown her that success meant nothing if you lost your humanity in the pursuit of it. And maybe, in the end, that was the real victory. Not crushing Carla completely, not maintaining perfect boundaries, but learning when to hold firm and when to extend grace, not for her sake, but for mine, for Emma's. For the future that couldn't be built on foundations of permanent resentment. Some bridges did deserve to burn, but some, I learned, deserved to be carefully rebuilt. Not to what they were, but to what they could become with honesty, humility, and the hard-won wisdom that comes from watching everything burn and choosing to rise from the ashes. Not for revenge, for peace. And that, I finally understood, was the sweetest victory of all.